meeting. To ensure that everyone can fully participate, here are just a few basics on using the Zoom, the technology, before we move into the presentation. For the best meeting experience, please mute yourself during the presentation, and unless you are speaking, which we'll do toward the Q&A portion of the meeting. We also suggest that you set your screen to speaker view, so you'll be able to see the panelists as they're doing the presentations. Sorry, I'm all grinning because I just see a pal of mine came online. Thank you. When we get to the question and answer portion of the agenda, if you wish to speak, please use your raise the hand feature to request to make comment or a question. And Sarah will help me facilitate this part. Sarah and Yuri both will help me facilitate this part of the meeting. If you join the meeting by computer, the raise your hand, it's raise my hand button can be found under the participant icon down at the bottom of your screen. And if you join the meeting using your telephone, then you could press *9 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. When we get to the question and answer section of the meeting, you can then enter your questions into the chat function, which you will also find down at the bottom of your screen. But we will not be answering the questions until we get to the question and answer and comments portion of the agenda. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. As we move into the main part of the meeting, I want to let you know that this is the first of a number of meetings on the proposal for a roundabout at Laureles Grade and Carmel Valley Road. There will be many opportunities for you to speak about this. And if you're not able to weigh in tonight with your comments, there will be other opportunities for you. So tonight is just the beginning of a process. As some of you know, the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee completed a corridor study that looked at various aspects of Carmel Valley Road. The intersection at Laureles Grade has the highest rate of accidents, and it is the intersection that draws the most comments and concerns from local residents. That has made this a real priority for my office and for an improvement project that could be funded by the Carmel Valley Transportation Improvement Program, also known as the CVTIP. The Carmel Valley Advisory Road Committee participated in identifying a roundabout as a possible approach at Laureles Grade. A subcommittee was involved with the selection of the consultant, and the committee will continue to be involved throughout the process. The committee chose a consultancy called GHD, and tonight we have two representatives from there, Jay Walter and Daniel Kerr, who will be part of our presentation. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the very newly appointed Director of Community Services Department for Monterey County, Mr. Randy Ishii. So Randy, if you would please go ahead and start the presentation, and I will be back to join and facilitate the question and answer portion. So thank you so much. So I think we're going to have a good presentation. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Adams. That was a very comprehensive introduction, and I appreciated the intro for that. By way of background for our public tonight, this is a concept proposal that is being brought forward for this intersection. There are various intersection controls in traffic engineering and in public works. They range from your two-way stop controlled intersection, where there's two stop signs and one major through street. And then you have traffic signals that are used at the four corners of an intersection, the four approaches of the intersection. And then we have roundabouts, which are also effective traffic control measures for an intersection. There are various benefits to a roundabout, and there's benefits of the other intersection methods I just mentioned, but this is a method that has demonstrated itself to provide a traffic calming element to it. It provides efficient movement of multimodal, meaning various types of vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists to be able to navigate around a roundabout. And it has other benefits to it. As Supervisor Adams had mentioned, there was a very collaborative and rigorous process that the county went through to make sure that we are providing a good product for our community, yourselves. This intersection, as mentioned, has a long history to it. And as such, it's gone through a set of different studies. One of the more recent ones was a Transportation Agency of Monterey County regional roundabout study. And another foundational study thereafter was the Carmel Valley Road Corridor Study, a document that was hosted and sponsored by the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee. As mentioned, we went through a rigorous request for proposal procurement process for the design consultant to begin the design work for the project, starting off here with the conceptual design process. And through using a subcommittee of the CVRAC, we conducted an interview through this competitive process, and the consulting firm GHD was selected as the most qualified consultant for the project for our community. And so with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Jay Walter and Mr. Daniel Kerr, the engineering manager and principals at GHD. And Jay, the floor is yours, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
There we go. Very good. Thank you, Randy and Supervisor Adams. I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here tonight with folks in the community and talk about this really important project. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which has my presentation on it, and then we'll get started with that. So making sure that everybody can see that, and I will then start that presentation from the beginning. So is everyone seeing that screen that I've shared? Just wanting to make sure everyone's seeing that screen with a PowerPoint presentation on it.
Yes, we see it just fine.
Very good. Thank you so much. It's sometimes hard to tell if you can't. So anyway, tonight, as promised, we want to talk about a roundabout at Carmel Valley Road and Laureles grade. We'll go through a few points for today. A little bit about our company. We want to talk about why a roundabout has advantages here. We want to share with the community some of our projects and completed roundabouts that we have designed and then have been constructed. Talk a little bit about the team that we have proposed for the project as we move forward, and our understanding of the issues at this intersection, and then our project approach. So GHD as a company is based on 5 continents. We have over 10,000 employees with 200 offices. So we have significant resources at our disposal and a lot of experience with roundabouts, especially in Australia and New Zealand, where they are quite common. We have folks from our Roseville office and San Luis Obispo office who are working on this project. So quite an important project for GHD. So let's talk a little bit about roundabouts. So modern roundabouts are not a rotary or a traffic circle or a neighborhood traffic circle. And you can see some of those examples in the pictures that we have on this slide. One of the main differences is that these circles have entry points that come in directly from the side streets. And that is not what we call a modern roundabout. The modern roundabout, and I'll put these little flags in so that I can talk from them, but a modern roundabout is circular. It utilizes specific design criteria for the entry angles and for the size of the center island, and it's designed to control speed through an intersection. It also accommodates the multi-modes of transportation that we have, like pedestrians, bicycles, and cars and large trucks. So typically it has a center island that can have some landscape or decoration. It's got a raised truck apron, which you can see in this light color around the middle, which allows some larger trucks to be able to track through the roundabout and still stay on pavement. It has the splitter islands at each entry point where the traffic going in or coming out of the roundabout is separated. Very importantly, it has what's called a yield on entry as you approach and enter the roundabout. So the idea then is that you need to control your geometric speed on your approaches to the roundabout so that you can control and slow speeds through the roundabout and have traffic be able to enter and exit in a very safe manner. So one of the roundabouts that has been constructed is nearby. Many of you probably have driven or have seen the Holman Highway 68 roundabout that was constructed now a couple of years ago. The feedback we've received from Monterey has been that this is performed in a very outstanding way. It also helped clear up some of the traffic confusion for the entrance to 17 Mile Drive. But this is an example of a modern roundabout with the yield on entry. It has clear markings for vehicles as they approach, so they can have a real good expectation of what they're going to do when they get there. So they're warned ahead of time and that a roundabout is coming. They see the lane markings where they need to be, and then they're told to yield at the entry point. And then they pick a gap to go and enter the roundabout. So a modern roundabout also accommodates all users, from emergency vehicles, large trucks and trailers, pedestrians, cyclists, and especially pedestrians with disabilities who can't have curbs and other kinds of things blocking them as they're trying to cross an intersection. Modern roundabouts improve overall safety at an intersection. And as you can see from these numbers, overall collisions, injury collisions, fatality collisions, and pedestrian collisions have significant reductions with a roundabout compared to a signalized intersection. So why does it improve safety? Well, there's a couple of reasons why, but one of the most important ones is you can see from this intersection diagram that vehicles entering and exiting the intersection have as many as 32 conflict points where they could potentially collide with another vehicle. There's also 16 conflict points for pedestrians, which increases the exposure for pedestrians trying to use the intersection. But with a modern roundabout, your conflict points for vehicles are reduced to only 8. And your pedestrians also only 8 conflict points. And that's because you have fewer lanes entering and you have virtually no one crossing anyone else to make left turns or U-turns or to go straight through. So modern roundabouts also provide a safer way for bicyclists to get through an intersection. So a bicyclist wants to travel through the roundabout, they can do it in a couple ways. The green dashed line that you can see coming through here is when a bicycle wants to travel through like a vehicle. Speeds are slower, and generally it's safer for a bicyclist to do that. But for a bicyclist that's not as confident, they can get off and use the shared use path for pedestrians to cross the roundabout intersection and then go about their way on the far side. So it creates a slower speed in the intersection for cyclists as they would try to cross. So a modern roundabout can accommodate large vehicles. And you can see with this double trailer hay truck coming through the roundabout, his intent was to make a left turn across this intersection. And as you can see, he's circulating slowly, but surely through this roundabout, other vehicles following slowly behind, one waiting at the entry point to find the gap to get in. And then that hay truck moves off onto the far side of the roundabout where he has completed his left turn without having to wait for all the other traffic to stop crossing for him to go through. For emergency vehicles, the roundabout is designed in such a way that those vehicles can circulate through at a relatively safe speed. They can't go screaming through at 40 miles an hour, but they can go through at 15 to 20 miles per hour, which provides safety as well as the ability for them to see more clearly vehicles that might already be in the intersection. The modern roundabout increases capacity and reduces delay. And what I've shown here is a couple of examples where um, a traffic signal, especially with a T intersection like Laureles Grade and Carmel Valley Road, a car that's waiting to make a left turn to go onto Laureles Grade, while it has to wait for other vehicles to cross through the intersection to make that turn, may have as many as 14 seconds or more of delay. But with the roundabout, entering that roundabout with an appropriate gap, circulating through the roundabout to make that left turn, your delay is much less. So reducing delay will have vehicles spending less time idling, there'll be less emissions, and we'll have less fuel consumption overall. So definite improvement over signalized intersection. At the scale of a freeway interchange, using this as an example, typically with traffic signals at the intersections of the ramps, you have many more lanes that have to be added to accommodate the traffic flow and help them get through on the green cycles. But with the roundabout, you can simply have the roundabout instead of the intersection. You don't need as many lanes approaching. And as a result, if you had a bridge structure, you may be able to leave it alone rather than in the example on the left, where you have to widen it and create a bigger structure, which is going to be more maintenance cost along with all the other asphalt that's there. So there's some advantages to roundabouts in that way from a cost standpoint and a maintenance standpoint. Modern roundabouts can also help with placemaking and beautification. And there's a few examples here. One on the lower left, very simple approach to a center island landscape, and others that are much more elaborate. This is something that the community can participate in and decide which way they want to go with a roundabout at this location and if there's going to be anything in that central island. So as it relates to GHD, we've completed, there's been 12 roundabouts constructed within California. We have another 12 to 15 that are in design right now in California. So we've really made a specialty out of roundabout design. And we believe that these have all been extremely successful. We have them in rural environments. We have them in more urban environments on some city streets. We have them close to freeways. And we also have them as little side road access points to help with turns. So the idea that we have good experience in roundabout design, I think should be a comforting factor for folks who would want to see the most efficient and most effective roundabout design for the situation here at Carmel Valley Road and Laureles Grade. So the team that we've put together for the project, there's a couple of local firms, Rincon and Whitson Engineers, who have a really big stake in projects and work that's done in this local area. And I know that they're, as part of our team, we've worked together with them and we've worked with the county. So we believe we've got a really, really efficient team that's going to work towards the best solution for the roundabout at this location. And as Randy mentioned earlier, it was a pretty rigorous process for us to be selected, and we appreciated the opportunity to be interviewed before representatives from the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee. As it relates to communication with project stakeholders, obviously there are a number of agencies involved in this project and its completion and its execution. We are ready and able to communicate through these types of community meetings or by email or snail mail or just regular old phone calls when there's questions or concerns about what may be happening or what progress we're making. So we don't hesitate to make a point to be having good communications with project stakeholders. So our understanding at this location, as Randy indicated in the very beginning, there's been a number of studies that have resulted in a recommendation for a roundabout at this intersection. So for us, the roundabout, instead of the traffic signal, has caused us to start working on the initial design, which we will be working towards getting the county's concept approval so that we can begin our design. There will be some right-of-way that's needed to be acquired. It'll be dependent upon the roundabout alternative that's selected. And there will be some environmental work that has to be done as the design progresses. We expect this design to take about 18 months to get finished. So the issues as we see them, and certainly we're open to more issues as they would be identified to us, but from a cost standpoint, we know that this is a very limited source of funding that's available for projects along or in the Carmel Valley. And we know that what you're going to want is a project that will stretch those dollars as far as we can. So that's job number one for us. Come up with an efficient design that doesn't gold plate or make something much more elaborate than it needs to be. We know there's some environmental concerns, especially with the creek nearby and trees and other visual values that are there. So we know that that will be handled with the environmental work that gets done. We know that from a safety and access point, this is a problematic location, as Randy has mentioned. We also are aware that special events are a really, really big deal for the Carmel Valley of all different kinds, attracting visitors and residents from nearby towns many times during the year, although with COVID, maybe a little bit less, but bottom line, we know we're going to get past that. So the other factor in this is going to be disruption during construction. We want a design that's going to take care of the construction so the contractor can be efficient, but also so that residents and folks going through the intersection can continue to get through with minimal disruption. And then we know, based on some recent things that have happened, whoops, sorry about that, that emergency evacuations are a big issue now, especially as it related to the river fire and what's happened before when you need to evacuate a large population of folks and you don't have a lot of big wide roads to do it. And so we believe that Roundabout can help in that way too, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So from a safety standpoint, as Randy mentioned, this is the highest collision rate location along the corridor. And as you can see from this red dot in the middle, that's the highest concentration of collisions. They're broadside and rear end collisions, which are generally related to two-way stop control with turning movements trying to take place when someone doesn't get the right gap and unfortunately they get hit by another vehicle. So we know that there is a bus stop that's important at this location on both sides of the road that has to be accommodated. We know that sight distance at the intersection is important because of grades on the approaches. And we know also that the Laureles grade road is a steep downgrade that has some folks concerned about whether there might be out of control vehicles that could come down and come into the intersection. So we believe the roundabout design will help with all of those things. Regional and local access, as mentioned earlier, this is a very important intersection to help folks in the valley, over into Salinas, and over at the coast. So what you see on this screen is 3 images. And if you look at the center island that's shown in green with red around it, you could see based on the aerial photos that they're all slightly different in location. And that's why I say location, location, location of that center island is key for the roundabout design. We want to locate it so that we balance the right-of-way impacts, we reduce the environmental impacts, and we create the most efficient stage construction that we can with this alternative. So this is kind of what we've been working on since we've been tasked by the county to get started. And so these are just a few of the options that we have been talking with the county about, but also waiting to be able to show to the community and get some feedback on those as well, because that ultimately all weighs in on the selected alternative for where the central island gets located. Stage construction, as you can see from these photos, we show that we need to be able to accommodate the contractor working, as well as folks who are going through the intersection while it's in all its stages of construction. We believe that we can do that, and we have good experience from our previous roundabouts that have been constructed in that regard. From a first responder standpoint, we believe the roundabout design will efficiently allow them to get through that intersection in a safe manner. And this information provided by the U.S. Department of Transportation, it talks about the advantages of a roundabout for first responders compared to a standard intersection design, which we believe this has a safer element to it than the standard intersection design. And we're getting close now. So this particular resiliency and evacuation slide, I wanted to share it with you because this is a location in Clearwater Beach, Florida, where the emergency evacuation operations, it uses the roundabout as a way to split traffic that might be going different directions where at the end point, where there's no need for traffic cones and all kinds of signs and other things in the middle of an intersection to try to get people to follow. The roundabout itself has clearly defined paths that, once identified for whether it's flow in the opposite direction or in the normal direction, it can be used very effectively for helping in an evacuation situation. So our project timeline today, we're talking about this with you folks. We know we'll have a number of more community meetings to talk about this. We're working on that concept approval, and once we receive that from the county, then we'll be in our design phase. During that time, the environmental review will take place. We will likely be complete with our design, and we anticipate in around January of 2022. And that's my presentation. So I'd be happy at this point to be able to answer questions as they might be. I don't know if I should go ahead and just stop sharing the screen. If at this point in time, I guess we could always bring it up again if we need to.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation, Jay. That was really comprehensive, and I love the picture of our little roundabout that we have up here at Highway 68 and Highway 1. It truly was a game changer. It just knocked out so many traffic issues that had been there for years. So we were all really pretty pleased with it. So don't go away, because I'm sure that some of the questions that we have will be needed. You will need you for that. And as well as Randy also. So I guess I'll just start by asking if there is any member of the public that would have any questions right now. And you can either put them in the chat, or you can go old school and raise your hand. And I'll be happy to call on you if I can see you. Okay, let's just see. Okay, so I'll start with Tom Gano. If we can unmute Tom Gano, please. There we go. Hi, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you have a chart? Do you have a chart that shows speed through the circle as a function of diameter?
No, I don't have that. But what we typically design the center island for is a speed of between 15 and 20 miles an hour to circulate through the roundabout. That's the general rule of thumb. And so we have the approaches set up to where traffic is slowed. And then as they yield and go into the roundabout, it's typically between 15 and 20 miles per hour.
Okay, thank you. I saw one question that came in before I call on you, Michelle, from Ellen Osborne, who wants to know, if everything goes well, when would the completion date be?
So my slide at the very end showed that we expected the design to be completed by about January 2022, which is 15 months or so from now. And at that point in time, it would go to the county, and they would go through their normal bid process. And of course, depending upon funding availability, the project, I believe, would take about a little over 1 year to construct. So it kind of depend on when they bid it, when contractor was signed up, and then probably about a year, maybe 15 months if we have a little bit of winter season that we have to deal with. And I think that's how long it would take to construct it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so what I will do now is I'm going to call on Michelle Bevard next, and then Bob Byrne after that. Michelle?
Thank you, Mary. My question is I've yet to see a study that shows the slope of the grade of Carmel Valley grade coming into a roundabout. I'm all for roundabouts. However, the Holman Highway roundabout does not have that steep of a grade that we have approaching. And so I want to know what you guys have looked into on that and what you plan to do to address that.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry,
good point. Oh, that's quite right, Jay. I was just going to say that those are very good points that Ms. Bavard raises. Laureles grade is a very steep grade that comes down into that northerly approach of the roundabout and the intersection as it exists today. While that is something that is going to be further evaluated and designed, Jay, I'll hand it over to you in terms of the things that you've already looked at in the preliminary design phase.
Sure. Thanks, Randy. And again, this is something that was brought up at one of the previous Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee meetings as it related to potentially out of control trucks coming down that grade and then coming into that intersection. So, a couple things about the way the roundabout would work. So the roundabout in place would have the speeds of the Carmel Valley Road traffic much slower as they approached the point where they were entering the intersection. So if you had a large truck coming down the grade that couldn't stop, then those vehicles would be traveling at a slower speed, which would give them, in my opinion, a much better chance of stopping and seeing that truck coming down without having it be a truck versus a car at a very high rate of speed coming through the roundabout, through the intersection. And the roundabout itself, as I mentioned earlier, with the potential for landscaping or not, it's possible that that landscaping could be left out so that if a vehicle was coming down the hill out of control, they wouldn't be hitting anything really solid in the middle of that roundabout island. But I believe the key element is going to be the slower speeds for Carmel Valley Road traffic entering the roundabout and being able to see that truck coming to the intersection.
Thank you. Thanks for that response. Next question is Bob Byrne.
I have two questions. One, has your company ever done a T intersection roundabout? And two, besides the steep grade, what are the other big challenges to the design of the roundabout?
So the answer to your first question is yes, we have done T intersection roundabouts, and that's information that I can certainly get back through the supervisor's office to you directly to let you know where those locations are. The second question is the key elements of this really are going to be the placement of that center island as it relates to how much property do we need to acquire, if any, based on the corner. If we move it slightly to the east or slightly to the west, we know we're probably going to try to stay away from the south where that slope drops down to the creek. So that's an important element of how we want to be able to place that center island. So try to minimize the amount of right-of-way that we have to acquire from adjoining properties is one key element. Avoiding that south area where the creek is from an environmental standpoint to not have any fill or large structures down there, that's another key element. And then having the approach from the Laureles grade side, the way that the traffic coming down the hill will then be directed and then split to enter the roundabout at we'll call it an angle or a radius that will allow them to decelerate to the proper speed before they would enter the roundabout. I think those are kind of the key things, along with being able to make sure construction takes place efficiently for both the users as well as the contractor.
So I want to be sure that I understood that correctly. So of the three elements then, which one, or do you know at this point, which one would require the least amount of right-of-way acquisition?
So we don't know that just yet. And that's something that we're laying out, and we're using our the right-of-way maps that have been created by Whitson engineers to kind of overlay with where the design will actually go on. And so that's something now that we have to sit down with the county, show them those alternatives and exactly how much of the property takes there are. So that has not yet been figured out exactly.
Okay, thank you. And then another question from Michelle wants to know what studies have been done to prove that that your opinion is correct about the slope to the roundabout.
I'll start us off on that response for Ms. Bavard. As we mentioned previously, there have been other studies that have been done in the past, and not in decades ago. These are relatively recent studies. One of which, as I had mentioned before, is the Transportation Agency of Monterey County's, aka TAMC's, Regional Roundabout Study in 2016, which is available online on their website. And I'd be happy to send you the link to that later offline, or send it through Supervisor Adams' office so you can review the document yourself at your leisure. And then a follow-up study to that was the Carmel Valley Road Corridor Study, again commissioned and sponsored by the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee. a committee here that's appointed within the Carmel Valley region. And they also evaluated, and there's a recommendation for a roundabout in that study. So in a general sense, what I would like to convey is that there have been 2 different agencies who have performed rigorous traffic engineering studies, and both of them have roundabouts as a recommendation for the Carmel Valley Road Laureles Grade intersection. So if a roundabout were not ideal or not practical or not feasible for that intersection, then certainly one of those studies would have made that statement and discontinued any further recommendation or forward progress on it.
Thanks, Randy.
And Jay, is there anything that you would like to add to that I may have missed?
Yeah, if I understand the question properly, the approaches to the roundabout, either from Laureles Grade or from Carmel Valley Road, we would look at and try to use Caltrans design standards for the approaching site distance length that's needed. So in other words, if you're approaching from a low point and you're kind of coming up a hill or you're coming down a hill towards a location, you want to have enough visibility so that based on the prevailing speed on the approach, that you would be able to stop in time. And so Caltrans has those standards. That's something that we will be looking at on all the legs of the roundabout to help us achieve that, we'll call it the optimal sight distance, so that you can stop if you have to, if you're going through that intersection.
Thanks, Jay. Next, I'm going to Robert Ellis, and after Robert, then we'll go to Carol.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Jay, you know, I live off La Rancheria, which is close to the intersection, and the traffic coming down there towards the intersection on the Laureles Grade is very, very fast.
80.
Is there any way to look at other ways to try and slow that traffic, like putting in some rumble strips or something upstream of the roundabout that would try to give people an indication that they need to start slowing down?
So yes, that is a possibility. That's certainly something we would have to work with Randy and the county on, because that's probably something that would be just outside the footprint of the roundabout, and probably something that would be likely a traffic placement of traffic devices that the county would take care of. I mean, it could be included in the design of the project. It's just not quite in the footprint. It's a little farther away. But you're right. That is an effective way of getting motorists' attention when they cross those rumble strips, to be all of a sudden thinking, okay, there's something coming up here. And oftentimes we'll use a sign in conjunction with those things too, to help people realize that there is something they need to be paying attention to.
Okay, thank you. I think that'd be good to look at, because there's also a lot of traffic that comes in, tourists on the weekend that aren't familiar with our area, and something which would give them a heads up may help them slow down before they would get to the roundabout, because.
Especially car week.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And now we'll go to Carol. Carol, you have to unmute yourself.
I have a similar question, and that's regarding the runaway vehicles or those going too fast. In European hills, often very rural, there are speed bumps put in, there are signs, but there's also a runaway strip. It can be made of bales of hay, or it can be made of not usually sand, because most of these are in not sandy places. But it does occasionally allow somebody who's going just too fast to hit a hail bay instead of the car at the foot of the grade. I don't know where, from the bottom of the steepest part of Laureles Grade coming to the south, it does level out fairly well, but people drive very fast. So I'm thinking about runaway protection.
Any comment,
Okay, well,
either of you?
I'll start us off.
Yeah.
So to your point and to Mr. Ellis's point, those traffic calming elements that you described to help give advance warning for a motorist, whether it be a trucker, whether it be a dually with a gooseneck 4-horse livestock trailer, or a constituent coming down in your standard passenger vehicle. Those are all things that are evaluatable in the design on the approach, but it's also things that that as a team with our consultant, the county staff could evaluate different traffic calming elements. And certainly we could talk about that further with the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee on what elements may be practical and feasible and supportable out in that area. Traffic calming devices take many shapes and forms. There's the signage, which is the first step. But then there's other engineered ones that can be placed. Now, because there's so many options, there are also pros and cons to each of those. And so finding the one that works out best for the community, besides the motorists, is the community and context sensitive approach that we should take, taking collaboration from the community as we apply that. Just by way of example, a speed hump, your traditional one that you see in a parking lot, that's meant for very slow speeds and usually for passenger vehicles. For larger vehicles, it's been known that they have caused damages to them, like fire engine apparatuses, the fire trucks. For a long while, the fire protection districts were not amenable to speed humps because when they were trying to mobilize to emergencies, they would experience front end or rear axle damage to their trucks. So that's, here again, that context sensitive solution we need to find that works out for everyone. And then rumble strips, they generate a lot of noise. So the question then becomes, is a generation of noise palatable to those who live on Rancheria and the other roads up there, Robley up there, places like that. So those are all the entire mix and suite of solutions that we don't look at in advance of the roundabout. And then the part two of it is that, as Jay had mentioned before, there are elements within the design that they are also evaluating and can look at that are what I'll call characterized as substitutes to a runaway lane. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. You've provided, I think, a really good explanation of the various options that are available. Certainly, we're going to be wanting to have the roundabout designed in such a way that traffic approaches it at a very reasonable speed so that they can slow down in time to then navigate the roundabout and not have it be something where all of a sudden they've been at a high rate of speed and then they have to come up to a very sharp turn. So we'll work with county staff and add things as needed to make the approach design as efficient as it can be.
Thank you. And I know Ed commented on the runaway lanes as well that are up on I-80 that many people see coming back from the Truckee Tahoe area. And now we have Lynn Williams.
Yes, you were mentioning the property that would have to be purchased or done by eminent domain. When would that need to be done, and who is that under the office of your office, Mary?
I think it probably, Randy, you'll probably be better at answering that than I.
Yes, I'll take that question. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, that is something that's still in the design phase. We do not have a timeline for you with a date certain at this point in time. We have generally ideas of when we would have to have that conversation. Here again, we are in concept design phase, and as Jay mentioned and showed that slide that had the different layouts of the inscribed circle of that roundabout, aka where the center of the roundabout is at, that's all still being evaluated. There's a pros and cons analysis that needs to go into making a good data-driven decision so that we're making informed decisions and providing our best engineering judgment and bringing it back to the community on their feedback and support for that idea. So while we have not figured out exactly how much right-of-way is needed at this time or when that conversation needs to be had, it is something that is under evaluation. And then to your point, while eminent domain is a mechanism available to public agencies such as the counties or Caltrans. It's certainly an approach, but it's not necessarily the approach that we would want to take from the get-go. We do want to work with you, our constituency, because we work with you, we serve you. Many of us are constituents here, so we are one of you. And so an eminent domain route is certainly not the first one we want to explore. And Jay, I'll hand it back to you if there's anything further that could be added about the design phase or something I may have missed.
I think you covered that well, Randy. And I would echo that point. I had worked for Caltrans for many, many years. And the very, very last thing that we ever wanted to see happen was an eminent domain action taken for property that was needed. We always had hope that we'd be able to work out with the property owners fair compensation and minimizing the take only to what's really needed. So.
Thank you. And next we have Catherine Zom. And you'll need to unmute yourself. There we go. Thanks.
So I hear that it's going to take about a year and a half, 18 months for building the, so what is your estimated time of delay for people who are commuting? For people who have to go to work during that year and a half, is it going to be an everyday half an hour wait, or do you have an idea?
Yes, so it's at this point it would be premature to calculate a delay, but the goal of the construction staging would be to have the construction activity taking place outside the peak hour times in the morning and the afternoon when people are commuting back and forth. Also to be able to have those lanes open for folks to use, even though some construction activity can be taking place. So our goal would be to try to have zero delay. We can't guarantee that. We don't know just yet based on the staging plan, but we would make every effort to try to make that as minimal as possible in order to not inconvenience folks as they're trying to go back and forth from the valley to the coast for work or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. We had another question, which was, could you just tell us what the subtle differences are among the three different ideas that were presented, the three different roundabout designs?
Yes. Would it be helpful if I shared that slide again, just
Sure,
to
yes,
be able
thank
to
you.
talk from?
Thank you. That'd be terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. Let's see, grab that one. Okay, and let me know when you can see that.
Yep, we've got it.
Okay, so let's start on the one that's on the top left. So if you look at where the center island is located, there's also a faint black line that comes down and then turns the corner and goes towards the west. So this island is centered on the north side of the intersection to the west. So it looks like it would need to take some property from that corner. It's moved away from the south side in order to try to leave as much of the existing roadway as possible alone and open for the traffic to flow on during construction. Excuse me. And then on this east side, you could see that we take a little bit of the area by these trees here, but largely we stay on the existing roadway surface. So the one that's on the right side, you can see that this has moved more to the east. It still stays up away from the south side and where that the creek is below. And we are now not taking, we don't have the property needed from this corner, the northwest corner, but we will require some property from the northeast corner. And as we understand it, there has been some property that's been dedicated for road improvements from the property on this corner. So that's certainly helpful. And then the one on the bottom tries to balance it out a little bit. We take less from the northwest corner. We take some from the northeast corner, but we still try to keep ourselves away from that south side so that, again, we avoid having to do any like retaining walls or fill work in the creek area, and we can try to use that roadway surface as much as possible. So that kind of describes the nuances of the three options that we have, at least to this point, been considering.
Great. Thank you so much for that. That was very helpful. Let's see here. So if you can stop sharing, there we go. Okay, and then I'll go, Ellen Osborne had a question. And the question is that currently traffic coming from the west is coming in at 50 miles an hour. About how far to the west would one need to start slowing the traffic?
It would, we would recommend that there would be signs about a half a mile away from the roundabout intersection, and then a quarter mile away for where you're actually beginning to see the physical change. That is the approach to the roundabout. You'll start to see some changes. So that's about how far away from the intersection we would be when a motorist would start seeing, no, there's a roundabout sign and it's coming up, and then a short distance later, they would be seeing the change in the way that the approach to the intersection has been done.
Good, thanks. And then Randy, I think this is a question that you presented. It was a question from Michelle, and it was, what are the causes of most of the accident? What are the statistics around the accidents that have taken place at Carmel Valley Road and Laureles Grade?
And I would certainly be happy to provide the statistics to you offline, and I can send them through Supervisor Adams' office. We use the state's system called SWITRS, an acronym that stands for Statewide Integrated Traffic Reporting System. And that is the repository the state maintains of all traffic collisions that a CHP officer has reported on and is incorporated into the system. Jay's exhibit that he had shown had what we call a heat map in the traffic engineering industry. And that shows the concentration of collisions, with red being a higher intensity of collisions. But the actual causation of them is something that comes out of these CHP reports, AKA the traffic collision reports prepared by a CHP officer, and are kept inside of the state repository, which we have access to. So we can provide you those statistics for this information that you seek.
Thank you, Randy. And now from Michael Waxer, it appears that option number 2 avoids any new taking and avoids the south side to avoid the drop-off and helps with the constructability. Are there other issues with option 2?
I guess I would say that we're in the process of preparing what Randy described as the pros and cons of each of the alternatives, and working with county staff to determine, okay, what are the important considerations that we would want to list so that we can give a fair evaluation to that. So we're in process. I think we like that alternative. You know, the appearance of it is that it avoids the most right-of-way take. But I would hesitate to say that's the clear winner or in any way at this point in time until we've done some more evaluations.
Thank you. And we have just a few more minutes. So I will just remind people, if you're calling on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And I will tell everyone who I can see on Zoom, if you want to go old school, you can raise your hand if you have another question, which would be just fine. And we'll give it a minute to see if there are any people who are on the phone that would like to ask questions. Tom Gano, you've got another question. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can ask your question.
Yes, it's my understanding that there's more slow speed collisions in roundabouts than in controlled intersections. Is that true or is that false?
So the slide that I showed earlier in the presentation, it showed a significant reduction in the total number of collisions in a roundabout versus a standard intersection. And it also showed a significant reduction in injury and fatality collisions. So I think overall, the studies show that there are fewer collisions, although the property damage only minor collisions that could occur in a roundabout or at a regular intersection are still there. But overall, the number of collisions has shown to be reduced.
Thank you. And now let me see if Randy or Jay, if you have any final comments before I close it out. Randy, anything you'd like to add to this?
I was just reflecting upon the very thoughtful chat questions that were displayed here on the Zoom, and the very thoughtful questions that the public has had. These are all excellent questions. And as Jay's timeline had shown, and as the way the contract is set up, and the way that we have worked it with the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee and with Supervisor Adams' office, this is meant to be a collaborative process. We are intending to have these community meetings progressively along the way as we talk through the solution that works out best for as many of the parties as we can. There are some that may not like the roundabout, and that could be just a matter of opinion, but the data that was used to get to this point has led us to this being a very viable option that would serve all modes traffic and as well as possible, plus have other uses for the roundabout, such as its ability for emergency evacuation, accessibility, and ensuring that there is good traffic flow and traffic calming component being conducted as it improves safety in that intersection.
Thank you, Randy. And Jay, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Sure. If at any point someone would like more information on any of the slides that I shared today, I know we provided that presentation to the supervisor's office and to public works staff. Please let me know. And as always, send an email or use Randy to get a hold of me. And I'd be happy to talk to any of you further about the way this roundabout should work and how we feel that there's some real advantages to it. So we're open to those conversations, and we definitely want people to have questions answered so they can be satisfied with what we're doing as well.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry. One more question came in just under the wire, so I'll quickly fill it out before I make my final remarks. And the question is this: to physically slow eastbound traffic, are there any changes planned besides signage? The concern is the sight line looking up the rise.
So I think I at least in part answered that before, but I'll reiterate what I said. And that was that we would be going farther out from the intersection itself and checking those design grades, the profile grades of the roadway. And we would be looking at ways to try to flatten those so that as a driver approached the intersection, they would be able to see the roundabout infrastructure sooner than they might now, because we know that there is kind of a quick rise right there before the intersection. And we believe by flattening that out a little bit and lengthening it, that will make a better visibility for drivers as they approach from the east, approaching eastbound.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jay. And thank all of you for being with us this evening. As I said, this is just step one in a process that will take a while, but we'll continue to have our community meetings, whether they're going to be in person or not. We'll have to see how that goes, but look forward to another Zoom on the subject. And as always, we continue to look forward to additional comments from people. And I kind of feel badly, we're extending our time. Catherine, is it a quick question?
It's a quick question. Will it be a presentation that people can share for people who couldn't come today?
Yes.
Emailed or shared to other people?
Yes, this presentation is being recorded, and you would be able to go, I believe, to my Facebook page, and you can find it there.
Oh, that would be great. Okay.
Okay, Good, thank you. And again, thank you all so much for being with us, and we will be doing this again before too long. Thank you, Jay. Thanks very much, Randy, and a special thank you to Yuri and to Sarah for the help. And I just saw that the place you can go to get the video of this meeting will be on the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee page of, shoot, what was that, Yuri? You just told me that. Is it on the county's website, the Carmel Valley
website? Yep.
The Monterey County website, the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee. You'll see it there, and then you can see yourself here. So thank you again. Thanks, Jay and Randy, Yuri, Sarah, and everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye now.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.